candidate of scientist in social communication, and he works in the social communication department of Volyn National University, named after Lesia Ukrainka. He's interested in different spheres, starting from history of Ukraine, diaspora journalism, and specifics of modern information space. And ecojournalism is his new interest. So today he's talking about ecojournalism in the current conditions of war in Ukraine. Hello, everyone. I'm really grateful to Indiana University to give me a possibility to participate in this program. While I was studying this topic, I became even more interested in it because I understand the more I learn about it, I have the more challenges and some other problems to discover. So, ecojournalism in the current conditions of war in Ukraine. I'm going to share my screen. So, ecojournalism is one of the most urgent and relevant branches of journalism in the context of war, is becoming as acute as political journalism. All the problems related to global warming and climate change, disruptions in established ecosystems, they have become more acute. Both human and natural resources are being lost as a result of hostilities. Pollution of the atmosphere, land, water, in particular the Black Sea, and the nuclear threat are urgent problems caused by direct hits of the enemy. Fires, explosions, contamination of the territory with scrap metal, mined areas, which is the problem for the years to come, will require significant investment in the future. And not everything will be possible to restore, because in the areas with intense hostilities and where the enemy uses the tactic of burnt out land, established ecosystems will be lost forever. That is why the media are increasingly spreading this notion of ecocide as a crime of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. So the Ukrainian formula for peace presented by President Zelensky at the G20 summit included the need to protect nature and the demand to stop ecocide. The international community, in particular European Commission, says that Russia should pay reparations to Ukraine for the ecocide. Thus, in January this year, the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe adopted a resolution on the impact of armed conflict on the environment, which refers to ecocide during war. In particular, they are talking about importance of defining the concept of ecocide in national legislation and the need to amend the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Law. Though in the Ukrainian Criminal Code we have the article for concerning ecocide, but there are still a lot of unclear issues. So punishment is from 10 to 15 years, and several cases are being considered, but they need to be clarified in more details. On the 14th of March this year, the head of the presidential office, Andriy Yermak, discussed the issue of Russia's responsibility for environmental crimes in Ukraine with Inger Andersen, executive director of United Nations Environmental Program. The head of the presidential office called on the international community, in particular the UN agencies, to actively involve in discussions of preventing damage as a result of the aggressive war of Russia. Andriy Yermak emphasized that the aggressor must be punished for the crimes committed against Ukraine. He noted that the damage caused to the environment of Ukraine as a result of war amounts to approximately 2 trillion hryvnias, and this does not include the damage caused in the temporary occupied territories. The threats caused by Russia's war in Ukraine are global in nature. Almost 80 years after the Second World War, we are actually in the same situation. Therefore, it's necessary to talk about what is happening in the center of Europe, in the country where we have several nuclear power plants, one of which is still occupied by Russia, and nobody knows what's happening there. Inger Andersen expressed her support for Ukraine in overcoming the challenges which Ukraine has in terms of ecological system, and she emphasized the importance of deeper discussion of this issue. On March 24, 2023, Dmytro Lubinets, the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, discussed with Asako Okai, Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations, the threat to the environment caused by the actions of the Russia in Ukraine. In particular, Dmytro Lubinets informed that due to the decrease in the water level in the Kakhovka reservoir, as a result of the actions of the aggressor country, the risk of an accident at the Zaporizhia nuclear plant is increasing. The settlements where Kakhovka reservoir is the source of drinking water supply may be left without water due to the Russians' actions. Asako Okai assured that Ukraine will continue to receive assistance and support from the world. It's logical that we should record Russian war crimes against the environment. On the 1st of March 2022, the State Environmental Inspectorate of Ukraine established an operational headquarters to record, organize information, and create a unified register of environmental damage caused by the Russian Federation's invasion in Ukraine. In March 2022, the State Ecological Inspectorate created the Ecoshkoda chatbot to record environmental crimes. This chatbot allows you to select the type of environmental crime and indicate the extent of violation in different areas like land, air, water, plants, animals. Such measures demonstrate the role and participation of the state and every citizen in the circumstances of modern warfare. Recording ecocide in the territories of Ukraine that are still under occupation is quite problematic. It is not yet possible to form a complete picture. To a certain extent, the picture can be complemented by space images. Social consequences of ecocide are extremely complex. It is impossible, full functioning of economy becomes impossible. In the deoccupied territories, it leads to new migration processes. On the other hand, those enterprises that evacuated after Russia's invasion to the Western Ukraine, in particular to Prikarpatia and Zakarpatia, they significantly worsen the ecological situation in these regions, creating new challenges for the environment, tourism, and recreation industries. Therefore, ecocide has several consequences, which are extremely difficult to measure now. Environmental disturbances in large industrial centers affect the health of the population, and statistics on the incidence of diseases ranging from sleep problems, depression, allergies, and cancer are sad confirmation of such ecocides. So, ecojournalism must remind society of such problems involving both official institutions and NGOs as experts. All this requires appropriate level of professional competence of journalists. The NGO Internews Ukraine, with the assistance of the United Nations Development Program in Ukraine and Recovery and Peacebuilding Program, and with the support of the government of Sweden, is implementing the project Environmental Journalism Training Program for Ukrainian journalists, where they have an online course of ecojournalism. This course will address a number of topical issues which are important for journalists covering these environmental problems. Environmental climate policy, effective public administration, division of functions, available tools, environmental control, circular economy, natural resources, environmental management. So the goal of such program is not only relevant, but it's also projected into the future. One more important component of today's warfare is disinformation and information and psychological operations, IPSO. in ecological issues. These include fakes about birds carrying biological weapons, about secret biological laboratories in Ukraine, blackmail and pressure with a man-made disaster, including a nuclear one. In October 2022, Minister Shoigu told the defense ministers of Turkey, France, the United Kingdom, and third NATO defense minister about the possible use of dirty bomb by the Ukrainian authorities. And the answer of the foreign minister Dmytro Kuleba was, we have no dirty bomb and we do not plan to have them. Secondly, Russians often accuse others of what they plan to do themselves. In January 2023, Russian intelligence started spreading disinformation about the alleged storage of weapons and ammunition provided by partners to Ukraine on the territory of the Rivne nuclear plant. This fake news contrasts particularly with the report about the start of the IAEA mission at the Rivne nuclear plant, which will record any threats that military actions can pose to this plant. By publishing such disinformation, the enemy may be preparing the ground for concealing future crimes. These are the components of Russian propaganda that we need to counter. These factors actualize the informational tasks of ecojournalism and strengthen the role of media literacy. This is why the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine and the Center for Countering Disinformation provide verified information which is spread in mass media. Speeches in the media and on television channels made by representatives of the Ministry of Environmental Protection, Natural Resources of Ukraine, and other organizations are very important for the public. In early January 2023, about the damages caused by Russian invasion to Ukrainian environment were estimated at the level of $35.3 billion, according to Energy Minister Herman Galushchenko. Due to Russian aggression, Ukraine lost about 90% of its wind and about 40% of its solar generation. In January 2023, Minister of Environment and Natural Resources Ruslan Strelets informed about the restoration measures. In particular, he mentioned the Holy Mountains National Park, located in the southern part of Donetsk region. Unfortunately, the territory of the park is almost 80% destroyed. Buildings and equipment are almost destroyed at all, and a lot of pine plantations were destroyed. It is difficult to talk about restoration of ecosystem in the frontline area.
Про обсяг збитків, які завдала Росія нашій екології.
It was informed by the losses inflicted to our ecology during the TV marathon. According to the data provided by the Ministry of Environmental Protection, this sum was assessed in about 2 trillion of hryvnias. Over 900 of the objects of the reserves were destroyed. It is above 1 million of hectares, 8 reserves, 2 biosphere reserves. 600 of species are under threat. Also 750 plants and mushrooms, which are in the Red Book of Ukraine. Also dolphin that reside in the Black Sea are also under threat. The 1/3 of the ecosystem of Ukraine is destroyed and damaged. So it can inflict also the state of the European rivers. Also, there is a problem of the drinking water and water reservoirs of Ukraine. In Kherson Oblast, for instance, the occupants destroy the watercraft, and Dnipro has the tons of oil and fuel, actually, which can seriously damage the state of the Black Sea. And of course, we can here in this case speak about the deterioration of the quality of water. During the continuous shelling of dams and on Kakhivska hydraulic power plant, there was a serious decrease of water, and it can also cause the decrease of spawning of fish, and it was reported in the numerous mass media reports. On January 25, 2023, during TV marathon single news, with the interview with Ruslan Strelitsy, it was reported about the accounting of losses inflicted by the Russian forces. The minister told and underscored that the sum of losses increases every day that goes by. Of course, we should do everything in order to take into account all the facts and fix them and put them on the record. The total sum as of today is approximately 47 billion of US dollars. Mr. Strelets reminds that the Russian forces deliberately destroyed the hydraulic constructions that allowed them to steal the water through the South Crimean Channel. These direct losses to Ukraine, and this is the specific case that can result in the institution of legal proceedings against the Russian Federation. By the way, the world practice shows that there are two such cases, and the intruders were actually brought to responsibility. It was in Iraq when the oil was actually burnt in the sea, and the second case was between Honduras and Costa Rica, and Honduras also had to reimburse for the losses inflicted to another country. After the beginning of war, the information space became aware of the nuclear threat. The seizure of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, of course, intensified the psychological tensions in the society. Of course, people remember the nuclear accident on the Chernobyl NPP. And of course, this also was a trigger to the increase of tensions. We understand that the security, nuclear security, is of primary importance. Only on March the 20th, it was possible to conduct the partial rotation of the personnel. After Kiev Oblast was relieved, actually, the whole picture of sacking of the NPP, Chernobyl NPP was provided. Actually, according to the data of the Ministry of Environmental Protection, the losses were actually in the amount of 3 billion of hryvnias and 133 sources of emissions was were damaged. In the beginning of February 2023, Ukraine is actively cooperating with the IAEA concerning demilitarization of Zaporizhia NPP and actually establishment of 30-kilometer zone of security in order to prevent nuclear catastrophe. On April 7, 2023, the mass media informed that the Russian forces actually kidnapped over four workers of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. As of April 13, 2023, we know that the Russians are actually trying to evacuate from the Zaporizhia NPP, and we know that the compulsory evacuation is going to take place. And of course, the Russian personnel is ready to be evacuated. Of course, also we know that near the fourth power unit of Zaporizhia NPP, the Russian mine has exploded. The explosion was so loud that it was heard by our specialists. The Russian forces tried to do everything to calm down the workers and the experts of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and said that actually there is nothing to be frightened by. At the same time, the occupants tried to intensify the so-called unreliable people and of course they face the great danger. The Center of Counteraction to Disinformation at the National Security and Defense Council has to do everything in order to disseminate information about the activity of the Russian forces. And of course, they are telling us that the nuclear launch briefcase cannot be used by only one person, and Mr. Putin cannot use it solely, actually. In 2023, in January, IAEA informed that the inspectors are going to come to the Ukrainian NPPs, actually, namely Rivnenska, Khmelnytska, Pivdeno-Ukrainska, and Chernobylska NPPs. Ukrainian mass media actually revealed such an idea, and it was informed that the joint briefing of Mr. Denis Shmyhal, Prime Minister of Ukraine, and IAEA Director Rafael Grossi took place on January 18, 2023. The new accent in this respect is the speech of Mr. Putin that the Belarus, starting from the July 1st, 2023, will be ready to accept and to accept the Russian nuclear weapons, including Iskander missiles that can be the carrier of nuclear weapon. So the threat of nuclear catastrophe and the weak support of Ukraine from the side of Europe is a lie which is disseminated by Russia in India and Indonesia. Also, the Russian propaganda has it that the military assistance to Ukraine can result in escalation of the conflict from on the side of the Russian Federation. Of course, the problem of the mine territories is another problem. Sky News British channel in the end of 2023 underlined that Ukraine is the most mined country of the world. Due to the military actions, it has over 40% of its territory mined. Mines Advisory Group representative Catherine Templeton actually stressed that it cannot be even compared with Syria or Afghanistan. Ukraine will be provided with armored personnel carriers, Vincent 1 and MC, that can help to break through the mines. It was said by Flesenberg, Forstbau Gesellschaft, and Pearson Engineering. Such machinery and such equipment will be provided to Ukraine up to the end of 2023. These are far-reaching prospects. And of course, we should bear in mind that the most of the mine territories concern the agricultural lands. It is very problematic issue. The International Organization on Demining, HALO Trust, thinks that the whole territory of the mines in Ukraine can be compared to the whole territory of the Great Britain. Since the Russian forces occupied a lot of fields in the east of Ukraine and some territories were deoccupied, still there are a lot of mines, there are a lot of traps, and demining activity would require approximately $37 billion as reported by the Prime Minister of Ukraine, according to the assessment of the World Bank. The quality of soil is very poor. According to the data of Institute of Soil Quality and Agrochemistry of Ukraine, as of the 1st of March 23, they were led to degradation to the territory in the amount of 10.5 million of hectares of the agricultural lands all over Ukraine. A lot of toxins, toxical substances like mercury, like arsenic, are observed in the lands. During the TV marathon in 2023 in April, it was said that the one-third of the territory of Ukraine contains mines and exploded and unexploded shells. Of course, it can be said that the heavy metals are observed in the land. Of course, it influences greatly the black soil quality and ecology in general. Mr. Artem Chaplinsky, the senior inspector of the state ecological inspection, explains that the oil film actually is the result of the attack of the Russian missiles in the oil tank on the 24th of March. And in order to follow the dynamics, the water samples are gathered. Mr. Pavlo Ivanov says that 5 days the heavy fire was observed in that region. And CO and CO2 was observed in that region. A lot of oil products also were registered. 43 million, that is the losses inflicted to the soils, and it led to the pollution of the 25,000 of square meters of agricultural lands, and the of course the subsoil waters were damaged.
The report includes the opinion of representatives of civil society organizations and officials of relevant structures. Maria Diachuk, who represents the organization Ecodeer, is convinced that the soil should be comprehensively examined. However, this is no mandatory algorithm for a comprehensive land survey. Taras Vysotsky, who is first Deputy Minister of Agrarian Policy and Food, reminds that first demining must be carried out and then soil samples can be taken and analyzed. However, farmers usually do not test the quality of black soil in the laboratory. Moreover, the fields are often located several kilometers from the demarcation line, and despite the intense shelling, they continue to work on the land, avoiding unexploded ordnance and marking them with flags. Employees of special groups have now a lot of work to do, as dangerous objects have high explosive capacity. Unfortunately, even in the areas cleared of ammunition, the soil is already destroyed, as heavy metals are released into the ground as a result of shell explosion. Mechanical and thermal pollution from explosions also influence the contamination of soil and its fertility. In some areas of Donbass front line, the content of heavy metals in the soil is sometimes 25 times higher than normal. So this is according to Maria Diachuk. The scale of the damage caused by the war has been assessed by experts from the State Environmental Inspectorate. Aerial photography is used in the temporary occupied territories. Dmytro Zaruba, first deputy head of the State Ecological Inspectorate, informs that about 280 square meters have been contaminated in Ukraine. It is clear that we cannot count or assess or measure these territories. About 2 trillion hryvnias is the damage caused to the lands of Ukraine. Ruslan Strelets, Minister of Environment of Ukraine, notes that it will take decades to reclaim the land. Depending on the degree of contamination, environmentalists will choose a method to restore the black soil. For example, growing plants that absorbed heavy metals or not cultivating the contaminated land at all. In April 2023, Rada Channel showed a report of Alexander Krivokolsky from Kharkiv region, who said that the speaker of the Kharkiv Regional Prosecutor's Office showed evidence of Russian aggression collected at a separate training ground. This as remnants of shells, missiles, artillery ammunition used to shell Kharkiv. There are more than 1,000 of them in this landfill. Most of them are from multiple launch rocket systems as Tornado, Grad BM-21, and there are also a dozen cruise missiles like X-101, X-25 caliber. The journalist commented that Russia has launched almost 5,000 missiles of various types throughout Ukraine since the beginning of its invasion. This data was provided by the General Staff of the Armed Forces. If the occupiers use them every day, it would be 11-12 missiles per day for the entire period. Stanislav Mankov, aviation and rocketry engineer, says that liquid-fueled rockets pose the greatest threat because liquid substances are the most aggressive ones, especially those used in rocketry. They are both toxic and carcinogenic. The journalist's commentary includes information from the Ministry of Environment, where he points that 450,000 tons of war waste since the beginning of the invasion, including 410 tons of cruise missile debris, can be found in Ukraine. These are only documented facts, so the number can be still bigger. Experts consider that X-22s to be the most dangerous as they are equipped with a liquid-fueled rocket engine, and the toxicity of this fuel is the highest among other cruise and ballistic missiles. Expert Stanislav Mankov names many dangerous substances that, when they come under the skin, can irritate the respiratory system, affect nervous system, and leave burns on the skin. Journalist Alexander Krivopolsky cites data from Forbes, where they say that Russia fired 225 X-22 missiles, 812 Iskanders, 635 calibers, 735 X-101 missiles, and 18 Kinzhal, and used over 2,000 short-range missiles. One of the first official reports of poisoning from rocket fuel was recorded in June 2022 in the Ternopil region. Press service of the Ternopil region of the police department reported poisoning of several law enforcement officers who were working at the site of enemy missiles in Kremenets district. The report of Alexander Krivopolsky from Kiev about the impact of oil products and rocket fuel on water quality shows that the employees of State Ecological Inspectorate take water from lake for analysis, and there used to be an oil depot next to it, but as it was completely destroyed, so all this debris was in the water. So they informed about certain chemicals indicators in the soil and water which were exceeded based on the results of their tests. However, it is still impossible to determine the actual level of contamination due to limited technical capabilities. And request to the Ministry of Defense to provide technical specifications of the missiles and shells that hit the soil and water bodies have no result still. Ruslan Stirets, the Minister of Environment, says that the total losses calculated using these 7 new methods amount to almost 2 trillion hryvnias, but this is not the final figure, and after the hostilities end, we can adjust it. The problem of recycling construction waste has taken new scale in Ukraine. This problem was discussed in the report of Alexander Krivokilsky from Hostomel. The project manager of the French construction company assured that the project was environmentally friendly and the most materials will be reused. In particular, she mentioned that before starting dismantling, they manually separate the foam and remove the slate containing asbestos. All this was done to dispose of materials which contained harmful substances at a special landfill. But during dismantling of structures, builders sought metal, wood, and concrete, which should be taken for recycling. However, head of the Association of Hazardous Waste Management Enterprises noted that unsorted construction waste can end up in landfill. It all depends on the amount of funds which were allocated for clearance. Construction waste can contain residues of various materials, including toxic ones. And this is a disaster. The conclusion, there must be some closed cycle solution. However, statistics shows a different result. According to the Ministry of Communities, Territories and Infrastructure, as of 2021, Ukraine had about 6,000 official landfills, where 230 were already filled, and over 824 did not meet environmentally safety standards. Materials about environmental problems in protected areas and nature reserves, the life of red data book flora and fauna, are inferior to eco-materials with more pronounced social component. The data shows that about 50,000 dolphins died in the Black Sea because of the war. Many warships, including submarines maneuvered in the waters of the Black Sea, sometimes approaching the shore, and dolphins were killed because of the use of sonar on the ships. Victoria Panasenko, representative of Ukraine at the Miss Universe 2022, drew attention to the problem of ecocide during war, and she emphasized that about 80 species of animals in Ukraine may disappear due to war. 60,000 dolphins and more than 6 million pets have died because of the war, and it will take hundreds of years to restore the damaged environment. She said, I'm citing, help Ukraine in this war, stop ecocide in Ukraine. In February 2023, in his report on the United News Telethon about the forecast, they said about the red book animals, mammoth, which survived the occupation because they had enough food supplies. And the head of the laboratory in Kazan University said that ecocide is part of modern warfare where they destroy natural cynosures. This will have bad consequences for the environment and nature in general. In February 2023, ICTV channel gave the information of the Ministry of Environment, which said that Russia has caused almost 2 trillion hryvnias damage to our environment. About 25,000 nature reserve sites have been affected, and a lot of lands were mined or affected by hostilities. Among them are 10 national parks, 8 nature reserves, and 2 biosphere reserves. Almost 600 species of animals are under threat and over 750 species of plants. Black sea dolphins are dying due to sea mining. So ecosystem of Ukraine is under threat, and this influences the climate of the entire European continent. Due to this, some of the Europe's rivers may dry up next summer. Public TV presented an interview with the director of the Mykolaiv Zoo, and they were talking about the work of the zoo during the war. The director recalled that in the first month they had very big problem with feed. They restored water on their own. Some funds were provided by the city, and help with generators came from Prague. And despite the air raids, the animals continued living their normal lives. Ecotopics in journalist materials is not a popular one, especially if these territories are located in considerable distance from the area with hostilities. The report of Alexander Stasishin is quite an exception here. He was talking about eco-settlement of IDPs in the village of Horishny in Lviv region, where the immigrants from the eastern regions, IT specialists, advertising workers, restored an abandoned farm. They started growing vegetables, raising livestock. The goal includes to provide themselves with food, but also to provide jobs to IDPs. They cleaned several lakes and started growing fish there. They also plan to organize recreation and rehabilitation for military personnel. They are building an eco house for IDPs, and their ambitious plans include launching of production of craft products and creating an eco estate where city residents can get acquainted with nature. So this report has a distinctly optimistic message. Environmental awareness is promoted by different media coverage of the government's program to exchange the incandescent lamps for light-emitting diodes. For example, there is an interview with Igor Smelnyatsky, who is director of Ukrposhta, the institution implementing the program, numerous reports from different regions of Ukraine on how they are launching this program. Media coverage of alternative energy sources, including the European experience, are also promising. For example, in February 2023, during the telemarathon, there was one report about the plans to build a solar power plant near the town of Rzeszów in Poland, and they are going to install 200,000 solar panels there.
It was reported on the 1+1 channel that the leading company, Naftogaz of Ukraine, is going to use the alternative electric energy sources. So in the nearest future, it is implied to introduce additional energy sources. The report from Zhytomyr Oblast, there was the solar electric station built, actually, which requires additional equipment. Alexei Chernyshov and the executive director Svetoslav Pavlyuk stressed that despite the martial law, Naftogaz aims at decreasing the dependence of our country from the fossil fuels, and the green energy is of primary importance for us. The countries of the European Union have agreed to implement in the full scope the renewable energy up to 2050, and to increase the production of the solar energy by 24%. Since Ukraine is officially a candidate to the EU, such commitments would extend on its territory, according to the experts. In order to make the transition to green energy more intense, we can use the Russian reimbursement and war reparations and the help of our partners. The report was commented by Gennady Ryabtsev, Doctor of Sciences on Public Management, candidate of Technical Sciences. According to him, the Ukraine has specific landscape. For instance, in Zakarpattia and Prikarpattia regions, we have the possibility to use the energy of rivers, small rivers. In Dnipropetrovsk and Poltava region, we can just use the wells for obtaining gas condensate, so we can use gas condensate, in fact. The journalists say that the south of Ukraine is the most optimal territory for solar panels and wind energy. And until the time the security is is okay, the more ecological electric energy we will obtain. So of course, all these factors will seriously influence the environment. Of course, every day that goes by, we face the new challenges and threats and our responsibility for the future. And we do believe that ecojournalism will not only disseminate information about it, but would also create the all necessary prerequisites for it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention. Maksym, thank you very much for such well-informed presentation. Dear colleagues, I see that you have some questions, so please do not hesitate to ask them. So thank you very much, Maksym. Thank you for your detailed and urgent presentation. We, of course, agree that the Russian invasion has some terrific consequences for Ukraine. And this military impact on the ecological state can hardly be assessed right now. But I have several questions concerning the mechanisms that are implemented in Ukraine, in particular, monitoring and registering of losses inflicted to ecology and especially to the reserves of Ukraine. We know that it includes biosphere reserves, landscape parks, botanic gardens, zoo gardens, etc. And it seems like we have in Ukraine institutions in charge of such problems and challenges. So the question is how the monitoring is being conducted with regard to reserves. Do you have some interactive maps or databases, for instance? I know that there are some of them, but they just give us only the big picture, but it does not have any kind of link to losses that we bear right now. And some links to electronic resources at present are absent. We have only have the link to the Institute of the War Studies. So what is the process of monitoring? And the second question is, do we take enough efforts in order to prevent damages to the ecological heritage and reserves that we have? And what resources do we have and state institutions have concerning this one? And I would like to thank you especially for some animals which are considered to be the symbol of our university, of course, because we are very anxious of how they do live under such conditions. Thank you. Thank you for your question. This is one of the most painful issue for us. Who is in charge of monitoring? Who is in charge of assessment of the losses inflicted to the reserves of Ukraine? We don't know right now. I am a participant of this process, and the volunteers are actually those persons who do everything they can in order to prevent damages to the ecological reserves. They institute separate proceedings in the European courts in this respect. And of course, this question should be guided in terms, or should be explained in terms of the Rome Statute. Actually, we have the draft law on this issue, but I think that this issue should require further attention in Ukraine, because nobody actually knew what genocide is. But after genocide that we had in Ukraine, the people became aware of the atrocities committed against our country, and we do believe that this war will be the trigger to the to raising the awareness of our people in this regard, because now we are witnesses of the great crimes committed against our environment. We gather the information, and in many mass media give different figures. Actually, how do they calculate such figures? What are the sources? We do not know. Actually, they are unknown. We do not know, for instance, how this or that plant costs, but nevertheless, we understand that this is our heritage, and when we speak about calculation of losses, their amount, we should bear in mind that the ecosystem is the comprehensive system which is related to many other sectors, and we should not take into account only the amount of animals, the number of animals who died actually as a result of war, but we should also take into account many other factors, for instance, degradation of soils, their destruction, and we can speak about contamination of our land for centuries. So when the shell explodes, actually, the sulfur and other contaminating substances, they penetrate the land, and the water and wind actually facilitate its spreading all over the land. And this is the term which can be described as the scorched earth, not only by shelling, but by the natural reasons. And this is the most urgent issue that we have right now. And of course, we should take into account the square of the territories which are contaminated. So the question remains unanswered. In fact, it is opened. You know that there was a Verdun battle of France. They used chemical weapon. 100 years actually have passed, but the land is prohibited for agricultural use. 100 years, but the land cannot be used for agricultural purposes. In Vietnam, over 2.5 million of shells were used. Some believe that in Ukraine even more. Now our main task as journalists is to fix the data, is to provide monitoring. The more we do it, the more information we can provide to the international organization, to institute legal proceedings. Thank you. Unfortunately, our time is over, but Mr. Vitali has a question, please. You're given the floor. Mr. Maksym, I would like to also thank you for your interesting presentation. Actually, you told us that there are some certain legal issues cannot be answered right now. This is a separate topic, but this is very interesting that in relation to the current events, we have the following situation. Whether you have some information about the people who are fighting on this front, on the ecological front, who are those people? You gave us certain examples. Being a history specialist, I'm not a specialist in ecological actual issues, but of course the justice should be restored. You spoke about Costa Rica, about many different situations, but can you just give us the big picture of how the aggressors, the intruders were brought to justice? Can you give us just some cases and can it be applied in our case? Do we have certain commitments or responsibilities or competences, legal competences to bring the Russian Federation to responsibility? Well, let's speak about the Hague Court or other institutions. I can be mistaken, but if we speak about genocide, so the discussion is divided between the Court of Hague and the Special International Criminal Tribunal. Maybe there can be a way to establish certain commission or court that will consider the cases of environmental crimes or ecological crimes, and can it be used in our conditions? Thank you. Thank you. I am a journalist. I am not a lawyer, but taking the information, taking into account the information that I have, I can say that Iraq, Kuwait, yes, there were several cases, but the war was not so long and the losses were not so big as we have right now in Ukraine. Each structure or international document like Rome Statute or they were not intended to consider such cases. And if Ukraine demands to consider the cases of genocide or demanded to consider such cases, so probably this separate documents can be used like a Kyoto document, for instance, or other ecological documents. Geneva Convention also has certain provisions on ecosystem protection. So we can take it as a basis for our future actions, and our specialists, our lawyers should take such documents into account and to create a kind of miracle for us. Thank you very much for our speakers and participants of our workshop. I would like to remind you that on Friday we have the following workshop. And Oreslava Ivantsiv will be present. She will tell us about the creation of image of Ukraine in American press, and Alexei Kondyuk, who will tell us about the war of Ukraine and how it changes the European Union. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for participation. It was incredible. Thank you, dear speakers. Take care. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye.